Hello, I'm Ian Simpson, and this is TokyoReal, and I'm here in UK, in Devon, in the beautiful Devon countryside with Guy Sheppard, who is owner of Exe Valley Brewery. Guy, welcome to TokyoReal.
Welcome to Exe Valley Brewery, Ian.
And this is a small local brewery producing real ale.
Absolutely, yes. Very traditional beers produced in the traditional manner in the UK.
Of course, when we think of real ale, we think of it as coming from the UK. Did it originate in the UK?
It is a peculiarity of the UK. Beer originated actually from Egypt 2,000 years before Christ. So it's been around for a long time, but different parts of the world have produced beer in different ways. They've had slightly different ingredients, different climatic conditions, and the way the UK produced it, by and large, brought on cask-conditioned beers, which is what is called real ale. That's the peculiarly English way of doing it, although the UK now produces a lot of other different beer styles as well.
Yes, and we're from, of course, TokyoReal. We're based in Japan, so most of the beer there is what we would call lager. It's gassed up and it's lager. So recently we're starting to get the real ales coming in. Sometimes they call them craft beer in Japan and microbreweries and whatnot. But basically it's all the same thing.
Basically, we're all using very similar ingredients. We're just doing it in slightly different ways. There is a huge interest in small local breweries, craft breweries, whether that be producing sort of lager-style beers or traditional English-style beers, or lots of styles in between. And yes, you will find English real ale brewed all over the world now in some in large quantities, some in small quantities.
Well, it's one of my great pleasures of coming home because I love drinking real ale, and especially your real ale.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, there are thousands of different styles, types of real ales in the UK, and they're all very peculiarly different.
Is that one of the unique things about it, that you can create your own recipes and your own tastes?
Absolutely. You take your ingredients and with different proportions, and to a certain extent just how your own plant works, it will produce something different. If I took our ingredients and brewed it in another small brewery somewhere in Devon, I'm sure we'd come out with a different beer, quite honestly. It is that sort of interesting.
Yes,
and sometimes you get the different beer.
So you're an artist, really, just mixing all this up.
It is a craft. It's creative.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the appealing thing about it, isn't it? It's not mass manufacturing. You're actually creating it and creating what you want.
You're taking the raw ingredients, and look, we basically start with that. 95% of what we put into the product is water. Now, our water comes from a spring on the hill behind us.
So it's natural water from the mountains.
It's actually natural water from the mountains of Silverton.
Wow.
Yes. So 95% of what you're going to be drinking is going to be water, or liquor, as we call it in the brewing terms.
Yeah.
And then you've got the malt. The malt is your basic raw ingredient apart from the water. This is actually produced by Tucker's in Newton Abbot. Okay. One of only 6 floor maltings left in the country, so that's fairly local to us. It's about 20 miles away down in Devon as well. Then we'll add some hops, and with the magic ingredient of yeast and a bit of time, we'll turn it into beer.
Lovely jubbly.
Which we might get to drink at the end.
I hope so. Okay, so Guy, you just told me that the 3 main ingredients are water, malts, hops, and yeast.
Yep.
Perhaps you could tell me a little bit more about what they are exactly and how they impact on the beer?
Certainly. The water, the biggest ingredient of all that, that's what it really is probably one of the most crucial things. Mainly water is, you need hard water for brewing, actually. In Devon, the water is soft, so we harden it a bit.
Right.
It's a process called Burtonisation.
Okay.
Because Burton-on-Trent is the centre of brewing, really, in the whole world. And it didn't become the centre of brewing by accident. It became the centre of brewing because of the water.
Okay.
The water is hard and it's got trace minerals in it that are particularly good for brewing, and the yeast needs trace minerals to work on as it ferments. So the water is interesting. And actually, if we go back to sort of Victorian or earlier times than that, people would drink beer rather than the water because the water was contaminated, whereas the beer was okay. You used to be able to get things called family ale in pubs,
right.
and they'd actually have to drink the beer. in small quantities because that had been boiled and you didn't get the.
Did they clean their teeth with it as well?
I'm not sure they even had teeth actually in those days, but beer was really quite a staple part of the diet before the water became pure.
And do most breweries use like spring water, natural water coming from the hills, or
they quite often use borehole water actually in towns? They'll pump it up. They've usually got their own water supply. Some of the smaller microbreweries don't. They're using the public supply, and what they'll do there is by and large let it stand, because what they don't want is the chlorine in it, because you're getting chlorine. Whereas of course ours doesn't have chlorine in it, which is much better for brewing. But larger breweries will have their own supply. We're lucky to have our own spring, but we, as I say, we do actually harden it slightly because that's better for brewing.
Right, and you call it liquor?
We call it liquor. Yes. So I know it's an odd. The malt is the main solid ingredient in beer. It's malted barley, as I say. This is made in Newton Abbot, very very local, and this is where we get sugar from. Right. Maltose basically, and we need the sugar as brewers. Because that's how we produce alcohol. We reduce the sugar into alcohol.
Okay, right.
Hops are interesting. You don't need hops to brew beer, but by and large most breweries do, and most beers have got hops in it. Hops are a preservative.
Okay.
They were brought certainly into the UK and probably into the general brewing scene of the world by the Flems when they came over to this country. Before that time, they'd used things like nettles and sage and other herbs. Just to sort of make it less sweet, because if you just have a malt brew, it is very very sweet. Yes. And so they were used as a flavouring, and they're also a preservative. It increased the quality of beer a lot, and there's supposed to be some cancer sort of limiting properties in hops as well, which needs a bit more investigation. Yeah. So I would encourage you to drink beer, because there is a school of thought that actually hops are quite good at fighting cancer. So hops and yeast, which is the ingredient I don't have in front of us here, but that's the magic ingredient. That eats the sugar which we get out of the malt, and it reduces that sugar into alcohol, which is what we get. Why we like beer so much. So really, I probably need to show you round the process and explain how we get to do all these different bits in our equipment.
That would be great. Let's go to the next room.
Okay, certainly.
Right. Okay, guys, so here we are in the next room. What's all this machinery about?
This is the brew house.
Right.
This is where the whole process starts. Here we have the mash tun, and this is what we first start with. We normally mash in about 6 o'clock in the morning. It's a 9-hour process for brewing, so we tend to start quite early. And in fact, the hottest part of it is at the start, so you want it to have it in the cool of the day. So are you saying that all the stuff that we mixed outside that you just showed me, it was all mixed up at the top? That would all come from upstairs. Yes.
Right.
Yes. And above us we would have a big tank of liquor, hot liquor, which we heat up to round about 80 degrees centigrade. We actually mix a bit of cold too. It's slightly cooler than that when we mash in, and we'd have all the malts mixed together up above this tube here.
Yes.
And we basically drop the malts down through that tube. It then goes through a thing we call the udder, which I haven't got out here, but that sprays it with lots of hot liquor from the hot liquor tank, and you end up with this about 3/4 full of porridge. Okay. Well, looks like it's not porridge. Sorry, looks like porridge. Yeah. It's basically very very wet malted barley. And it's a bit like, sorry, it's terribly English, I'm afraid, but it's a bit like putting your tea leaf into your teapot,
right.
And you let it stand in the mash tun. And what we're doing there is we're dissolving the sugars that's in the malt, and we want those to produce the beer.
Okay.
And we let it rest for about an hour, as you would if you're making traditional English tea.
Yes.
And then you draw it off. There's a tap at the bottom, which you probably can't see here. There's a tap there, that connects to that pump there, and then pumped all the way up that pipe, and it ends up going into this big vessel which is called the copper.
Okay.
And all while that happens, we rinse it through with more hot liquor through the spar jar. I'm going to turn this on now. This is just cold liquor. and that will spray what we call the goods in the vessel with more hot water to rinse all the sugars out.
Right.
Little bit noisy. I'll turn it off. But you get the idea. That goes on for a further 2.5 hours or so. Okay. So it's quite a long process. And
so at this point, it's not alcohol.
It's no alcohol. It's pure, all we're getting out at the bottom is malt extract. Right. And some people will know malt extract. It's just a strong sugar solution, basically.
Okay.
No alcohol whatsoever. And in here at the end, we've got a load of spent grain. It's called spent grain. There's still actually quite a lot of goodness in it. And we dig it out and we send it up to the local farm, and the cows love it. Oh, right. So there's no alcohol in it.
Everything being used, and
everything being used, absolutely. So we will dig out that grain as all the malt extract is in the copper. Now the copper has got some burners underneath it, right. And we will heat it until it comes to boil. And at that point, we probably need to move over to demonstrate the copper a bit more.
Okay. Okay, you moved us into the next part now, the next part of the process. What's this big machine for?
This is the copper. This is the biggest vessel. We heat it under here. There's 4 big burners in under there. It's direct heat by gas, and we bring it to the boil. It's called a copper, although it's stainless steel. They would historically have been made out of copper. And in the early days of beer being brewed, sort of almost brewed at home in brew pubs, before you get large industrial breweries, they would have brewed it in their copper that they had for washing the clothes, and there'd be one day of the week where they'd have used it for brewing beer. Right. So you can still see one or two of these things in English stately homes where they doubled up the laundry and a brew house. Oh, interesting. So anyway,
added some extra taste.
Yes. Well, I digress a bit, but that's a bit of the sort of social history of brewing, etc. Yeah. But nowadays, breweries tend to just brew beer and they don't wash clothes.
Well, my image, when I look at breweries, I often see the copper-looking machines they all look very beautiful. Maybe they're not real copper, they're copper plated or something these days.
I think there are certainly some brew pubs, etc., that are very good at the outside finish. Right. But generally, the internal stuff is stainless steel these days. It lasts forever. It's very, well, I would say it's easy to clean. You have to clean it, but you can get it scrupulously clean. And that's obviously important. What's inside the vessels is maybe quite a contrast to what you see on the outside of the vessels.
I believe that in a lot of these machines, you actually have to go inside every week and clean them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Yes. All these vessels we would physically get inside and clean them
before every new brew.
Before every brew. Well, and after you've tipped everything out, you get in before and after. You sterilise it before you brew, and you clean it after you finish brewing. So you physically get inside with a green scourer. It's very basic, and do that. Not much chemicals we use. We try and use the minimum amount of chemicals. It costs money, and it's not very good for the beer. So it's elbow grease is how we
I always
clean
had this image that it was more high tech, but actually it's elbow grease. You're getting inside.
No, even in the largest of the breweries, in the very largest, yes, you probably don't see a person, and you can't even see the beer. But even in the larger breweries, yes, they will get inside, and green scourers. All brewers use green scourers. Right. Yeah. We've got one here. Look, yes. Green scourer. They're always to hand in a brewery. Anyway, I'm digressing from the brewer. We've got our wort, which came out of the mash tun, and it's called wort now. Wort. Which is just a strong sugar solution, a malt extract, and it's in here. We bring it to the boil. So at that point, we add the hops to it. Okay. We might add the hops at the start or in the middle of the boil, but we boil it hard for an hour and a half. That will precipitate any proteins out of the malt that we got through in the end, and it also it's getting the flavour from the hops to get into the beer. So at the very end of that hour and a half, you've still got you've got a sugar solution. It's now very hot, yes. And it's got some flavouring in it. Right. We let it then stand for about half an hour, and the hops sort of percolate down towards the bottom of the copper. There's a little rough filter in the bottom, and the hops will just sit on the filter, and we pump it out to the bottom. There's a pump in the corner there, which and it'll be pumped there. Initially, we pump it back into the top of the copper, and we do that to filter it through the hops to make sure it's completely clear.
Okay.
And once we're happy that it's completely clear, it only takes a few minutes, we divert it, and there's two coolers there. They're just simple heat exchangers. They swap the heat from the hot wort with the cool from the water from our spring, and you should get cool wort going through the room to the next door, and you'll get a hot water as a waste, which goes back up into our hot liquor tank for the next brew, so that's saving a bit of energy.
Yes. Yeah.
And at that point, we probably want to go next door.
Okay. Okay, we've moved into the next room. Where are we now?
This is the fermentation room. This is where the magic happens. Oh yes.
The magic.
Yes. So from the copper, we cooled the wort, and it all pours into one of these vessels. There's three fermentation vessels in here. And once we've transferred it all, we've dropped the temperature down from boiling point, which is a little over 100 because it's a sugar solution, down to about 17, 18, 19 degrees centigrade. And then we add the yeast. Okay. We pitch the yeast in, and the yeast over a period of about 3 or 4 days will reduce the sugar to alcohol. I nearly had it the wrong way around there, sorry. And then we have beer. So the wort turns into beer.
Right. So when you add the yeast, that's what starts turning it into beer.
Yes. Yeah. The yeast is amazing stuff. It will regenerate itself as it's eating the sugar about 3 or 4 times. And it actually sits on the top of the beer, so you get a big froth, and it can sometimes actually come over the top of these vessels.
Right.
After 2 or 3 days, we will skim some of that yeast off, and we use it for then pitching into the next brew. Okay. So you pitch from one brew into the next, and the yeast will go on ad infinitum. Right. And we still have an awful lot of surplus yeast. If we were a large brewery, we'd sell it off to Messrs Marmite, which love it or hate it or whatever. That is yeast extract. Right. And Marmite is based in Burton-on-Trent, but we're not really big enough to sell our surplus yeast to Marmite. Yeah. But all the bigger breweries will anyway. So yes, after 4 days, or 3 or 4 days, we should have the beer. We will then cool it in these vessels, and because as the fermentation has gone, the temperature has increased. We'll put it in here, as I say, about 18, 19 degrees. It'll increase up to about 24, 25 degrees centigrade. Just naturally. When it's a chemical reaction.
Yes, yeah.
And then we reduce the temperature down to between 6 and 10 degrees centigrade, depending on the ambient weather and the beer it is. And then the beer is ready to be transferred into the next room.
Right. Let's go to the next room.
Why not? Okay, so there you are. So would you like a beer?
I would love one.
Let's go.
Is this a special brew?
This is actually our winter beer. Winter Glow, we called it. In fact, we've won awards with this. We got first prize nationally with Cameron, the Champion Beer of Britain, with it 2 years ago. So,
Champion Beer?
Champion Beer of Britain, yes. So in the Champion Winter Beer it was in 2014. So
that makes it special, yeah.
Well, it makes it special anyway, didn't it? There you go.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you. Oh, oishi desu. Oishi. That means yummy, delicious in Japanese.
Excellent, excellent. I'm sure they would enjoy it.
Yeah, and what sort of strength is this then?
This is actually 6%, so for a beer it's relatively strong. Well, for a British beer it's relatively strong. You go to somewhere like Belgium and this would be regarded as extremely weak, but because they're doing sort of 13, 14% as their stronger beers. But for a British beer, yes, it's a very, very traditional winter warmer is what they would have been called. They would have brewed a stronger beer for the winter to warm people up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really do like this. Yeah. And what sort of flavour would you describe this?
This is sweetish. It's got lots of the darker malts in it, and that's giving it a good sort of burnt, deep, roasted taste to it. Proportionally there isn't as many hops in there, so you would. But the hops are there to balance it. If we didn't have the hops in there, it would come out extremely sweet. Right. It is, but for a beer, it is relatively sweet. But yes, lovely burnt roasted.
It is a lovely beer, yes. And does this kind of beer travel well? For example, if I were to import it to Japan, does it travel?
One could try. I think.
You know, we say that Guinness doesn't travel.
Yeah. I think. I'm not going to say it's a complete fallacy that beer doesn't travel. Yes, there's an element of it doesn't travel, but actually the stronger beers would travel because they've got the strength, so you're not going to degrade it. Because of course the English exported beer to India. India Pale Ales is where that came from. And they were generally very strong, very hoppy beers because they had the preservative in it, and the strength would survive the passage to India. And they drank gallons and gallons and gallons of it over there. So yes, the stronger beers would travel. I'm sure this would travel to Japan fine.
And so from the fermentation cask, it comes into the. Do you call these firkins?
Now this one here actually is a pin.
Right.
They're very traditional sizes. Everybody calls them barrels.
Okay.
They're not barrels. A barrel is a size, it's a measure.
Right.
And in the UK, it's 36 gallons, which is in litres about 160 litres, 161 litres or so. A strange amount. You can have barrels of oil, you probably know that, but they're different sizes, and American barrels are a different size. But all the casks, because that's a generic term, are fractions of barrels.
Right.
So you next go down to a Kilderkin, I haven't got any here, which is 18 gallons. The standard size is the firkins, which are all over there, and they're the 9 gallons. Those are the regular size that go into pubs. And then you've got the eighth of a barrel is a pin, and that's 4.5 gallons, 36 pints.
Right, so a firkin is 72 pints, is it?
A firkin is 72 pints.
Right. Okay. That's what you usually send out.
That's what we usually send out to the pubs. And metrification has not come into the brewing trade, I'm afraid. Not in the UK anyway. They've tried it and it doesn't work. The British are rather peculiar. They like their pint. So a firkin, 72 pints, that's the standard size. That's a quarter of a barrel.
Right. And do you do any, throughout the year, any special event kind of brews?
Yes, we do. We've got our regular beers, we've got our seasonal beers, which is one of them. But yes, we'll occasionally produce special beers for things. I had a 60th birthday this year earlier, and a special beer was produced for me. And we always do one for the village street market, first Saturday of August. We did lovely jubbly this year. Always done a special beer for that. It's good publicity for the village, and it helps sort of gain interest and get people to come and visit it. So yeah, if something special comes up, we'll
make a special brew.
We'll make a
your
special
own
brew.
recipe.
Well, yes, it's definitely a new recipe. We have great fun in dreaming up the recipes.
And I hear you have an event here once a year with live music and.
Yes, we do. We have what we call Beer Day. Which we've done for 3 years now. We did it originally for our 30th birthday party because we started in 1984. So the first one was 2014. And we've raised money for charity. We just let people come and look at the brewery. They give donations to the beer. We let them have the beer free, so to speak, but we have a collecting pot out, and we raise money for charity. Local charities or national charities, we pick a charity each year. Yes, there'll be music, there'll be people, food, and a lot of people come and help us run it, and people come from far and wide to enjoy it.
I'm sure, yeah. I mean, I love the fact that the small traditional brewery is thriving and probably even getting stronger nowadays, you know. And for me, I've never been around a brewery, so today has been extremely interesting.
No, thank you.
Very enlightening, and this is gorgeous.
And it's going down very well.
We switch a camera off. We'll have a few more of these if that's okay. So, Guy Sheppard, thank you very much for your time.
No, love to meet you.
I do appreciate it, and our Japanese viewers are going to love this.
Yep.
And
pity isn't taste as well.
Yes. And maybe next time I come home to UK, I'll come back and have another beer with you.
Certainly, you're very welcome.